For Chara, art was her life. She lived, breathed it. She cared about the work in her collection so profoundly.
Part of the great power in this collection is how each object both reinforces and contextualizes the other.
Seems like there's an extraordinary diversity of artists, of media, of movement, of period.
She was a very strong woman and celebrated being a woman, being feminine, and loving life, enhancing life, enriching life, and art was absolutely integral to that.
There are so many elements that distinguish this collection. The rarity of the objects, the way in which she displayed them in her varying homes, the way in which she shared this collection with the public, inviting people into her home, the scholarships and the books that she herself put together.
The house in Northern California was a house that had wonderful spaces and walls, and she used them beautifully. But when she decided to have a house in LA, she built that house from ground up to be specifically a place for art. And she knew Duchamp was where her collection started, and then went forward from there.
She purchased that stunning home specifically to fit her Judd. She walked into the house and pointed at the wall that the Judd was on and said, "That's where the Judd's going," right next to the Mark Bradford to the left, and really an amazing dialogue between the two. The starring work amongst a number is Frank Stella's Honduras Lottery Co. from 1962. This painting is one from a suite of 6 concentric squares that Stella executed in '62.
She has one of the great Bob Gober sinks, and it's just the canonical piece.
Gober's sinks are the ultimate example of making strange. These objects that are so familiar, but when extracted from context, take on this other meaning and questioning ideas of cleanliness and purity and hygiene, which is something that Gober, as a gay man living in New York, was very concerned with.
Within her homes is an abundance of intrigue, surprise, conversations. For example, in her bedroom in Tiburon is a 1965 Eva Hesse called Top Spot. It's a bright and captivating work that is a distinct line in her career in which she enters Germany and this period as predominantly a painter and leaves as a sculptor. She starts making what become the most iconic artworks from this early period, which are these wall reliefs. Across from that, a beautiful Louise Bourgeois early marble torso. To the left of that, an incredible painting by Georgia O'Keeffe of a pelvis. To the left of that, a small Agnes Martin drawing. It's in this room alone that we see so many of the core themes that are within the Schreyer collection. Minimalism, the history of sculpture, the history of abstraction, the history of female artists.
Also, the Bonteque as this alien, fragmented pieces of canvas with wire. It's incredibly strange, but incredibly beautiful.
She was interested in the newer, younger generation, especially women. She has a fantastic Amy Sillman, Charlene von Heil, Jacqueline Humphreys, Rachel Harrison that was very challenging. She went to Berkeley, studied art history. She was a wonderful supporter of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, of the Hammer Museum, Museum of Contemporary Art.
Chara thought about art as being the ultimate lens through which to examine the world and examine the people around us and the way that communities and cultures interact. But I also think what Chara really loved about art was the ability to help other people love it.
She loved giving tours of the collection to endless numbers of museum groups, private groups, individuals, and she knew it inside out. She could tell you stories about every work, stories about the artist, stories about why she picked this. Chara was Jewish and very proud of her heritage.
She was a daughter of Holocaust survivors, and this informs a lot of how she saw the world. A lot of the major themes and narratives and stories in the collection are a look into what it means to survive war, what it means to be a displaced person, what it means to deal with the psychological aftermath of all these things, and that despite these tragedies, there's really beauty in the world.
It's rare for a collection to have been featured in one amazing and well-known publication. In this case, there are 2. There's the amazing book Art House. It was edited by Elisa Carroll, which is sort of an exploration of Chara's partnership with Gary Hutton, the designer, and features these stunning photographs of her residences and the art in them and the dialogue between those two. And more recently, there was the extraordinary book Making Strange, published by Douglas Vogel and Hanake Skorath. that is really more of a deep dive on the collection itself, on the objects, on the dialogues between the objects, and how all of that comes together to create this collection as a whole.
What really stands out in terms of Chara and this collection is the ethos and unique way that she herself saw what it meant to be a collector. She said it herself, an exploration of her deep passion for the historical dialogues between objects and ideas.
She had incredible pleasure living with the things she lived with. Art meant so much for her that I think she wanted to bring some of that pleasure and intellectual life to other people, to encourage them to experience art just as deeply as she did.